So some of the real funny capers are ones that you don't expect to happen. And many years ago when I was working the hype car with a guy named Ray Lyons, who's long since passed away, we were in Van Nuys and we'd go out and we'd work just heroin. We're the only two guys for the whole valley, but we worked what we call a hype car. So we were working on heroin users and so forth because of all the crimes they would commit in conjunction with, their addiction. So you'd hook up a bunch of bodies, usually we get 3 or 4, and then we come back to Van Nuys Station and we go on the second floor, and they have a report writing room right outside Watch Commander's office. And it's all plate glass windows. And it's a second floor tiered parking lot as well, and there's a ramp that comes from down below up. And it's off to the east a little bit by about, 35, 40 yards. And you'd sit next to the window and you'd be doing your reports, and it's going to take a while because you've got to fill out your ski charts and all the stuff and schematics and all and whatever. And so you're filling out the rest report and you'll be right next to the plate glass windows, and right next to the plate glass windows on the outside there's a planter at Van Nuys. There used to be, I don't know if there is anymore, but the thing was recessed probably about 2 feet down into the deck, and they had the shrubbery and everything else. And what would happen when you're sitting there over a period of time is motors, the guys working the motorcycles, motors would come up that ramp and they'd hit the throttle, they come up the ramp, they'd probably be doing about, 30 miles an hour, and they'd literally almost turn the bike in the air to the left. And then as soon as you'd hear their gun the throttle, you'd hear the brake hit as soon as the rear tire, so they kind of check themselves, and then they come drifting up the last 30 yards, and as they came drifting up, they kill the motor, they take off their gloves, toss it inside the windscreen on the motorcycle, the helmet would come off, they'd put the kickstand down, both of their feet were down, and they'd use their palms on the handlebars for the motorcycle. They'd put their palms on it and they'd drift up, and just as they stopped, they just walk off in one motion. I mean, it was like pure ballet. It was pretty funny, but it would look pretty cool, and they all did this, so you'd hear this gunning, and then you hear the brake, and then they check, and then the motor's off, and they fly up, and the gloves are off, and the helmet's off, and then they just float up, come to a stop, kickstand down, and just walk in like nothing ever happened. So you'd get this a bunch of times, throughout the day or whenever you're writing reports. One day Ray and I are sitting there and we're working on our reports. We have our heads down. He's doing his reports. I'm doing my reports on the arrest. And we hear the same thing. We hear the brakes, accelerator, the whole 9 yards. And all of a sudden there's this huge crash against the window. And we look right next to us, and all we see is the back of these boots against the glass kind of sliding down. And what happened is this guy, motor officer, misjudged it. And so the bike's, in the shrubs. He goes upside down. His boots are up. They're called Danner boots, I believe. Motor boots, the big long ones. And he slide down, and we kind of look over. Typical police. You're not going to help the guy. He's probably dead, but you're not going to help him. I mean, why? That wouldn't be fair. So we look over like this, and I have to give this guy credit. I don't know who he was to this day, but he gets up, keeps his back to the window. He's got brush sticking out of his, all over his uniform and everything else, brushes himself off, sits there. Bikes are heavy. He picks that thing up, gets it out of the planter. The windshield's broken. He takes that, puts it down, gets on it, and then drives off. Because there is no way in the world this guy is going to bogart himself out to let anybody know who it was that just, screwed the pooch, so to speak. And then he just disappeared. And he probably went to some auto parts store and fixed it himself, so he didn't have to put out a TA report and take a bunch of days. Anyway, I thought that was pretty funny. And the real funny thing is that anybody else in the report writing room, typical police, everybody looks, and not one person went out to help this poor guy. So those are some of the cool capers I like.